What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Let's Talk Entertainment and Media live stream. And today we're continuing our decade look backs with the 1990s, one of my favorite decades of all time in film and just in general, since that was the decade that I was born. And the 1990s were a pretty big change from film. The 1980s were filled with a bunch of what we would consider commercial movies, four quadrant movies, just trying to get everybody in there. And then in the 1990s, we kind of shifted back to more what we got with the 1970s, but we also got a bunch of more summer blockbusters. And, that was the rise of action, CGI, Jurassic Park. All right, let's see who's going. That's from John Doe Juggalo. What's up, John Doe Juggalo? How's everything going today? Shamrock Balls is here. What's up, Shamrock? Glad you guys could all make it to the live stream here today. And I figured we'd do this every Saturday, try and talk about, any kind of subject we want to talk about. The 90s is just a jumping off point. I got some of my 90s movies back there, some of my personal favorites. I don't know what your guys' favorite 90s movies are. Some movies just missed the 90s that were some of my favorites, like The Last Crusade and obviously Batman 89. But the 1990s, as far as a decade in film goes, it's probably one of the better decades, just in the fact that we kind of had the rise of a bunch of new technology. The CGI, it was done best in Jurassic Park, in my opinion. Still to this day, it's some of the best because they combine physical effects with, CGI effects instead of just having to have that look that we would end up getting in the late 90s with 1999's The Phantom Menace, which I think relied too much on CGI and has made that movie age even worse than it would have based on that script, unfortunately. But I guess in the 1990s, it was nice to have Star Wars back because George Lucas was waiting for his prequel trilogy until the technology caught up to it. But unfortunately, technology never stopped. So now those movies they don't look good anymore. And The Phantom Menace wasn't my favorite Star Wars movie, let's put it that way. It'd probably rank in my bottom 2 or 3. So what do you guys want to talk about as far as 90s movies? You guys have any favorites that you want to discuss? If not, I'm going to jump right off with 1991's Terminator 2. That was the one that changed it all for the James Cameron and Terminator franchise. That one was one of my favorite movies ever, but that kind of shifted away from what the Terminator was, which was more of a sci-fi horror film was the first Terminator movie. But then Terminator 2 Judgment Day became more of a summer blockbuster. I think it's a little step down because of the humor. It kind of feels more like a summer blockbuster, but it's still a Terminator film. It's still Arnold. Shammer Bros, bro, that film bored me to death in the cinema. Oh, I completely understand that. Phantom Menace was brutal. I don't like that movie at all. Tell him Freddie said you love Terminator 2. What a great film. Still not better than one. I 100% agree with that. Kevin L's here. What's up, Kevin L? He wrote, "Hey, John." Nothing was as good as T2 probably in the 90s. I always find it fascinating that Terminator 2 came out 4th of July weekend, 1991. Then the next weekend was Point Break from Catherine Bigelow, who he was married to. So they had back-to-back movies, nice husband and wife deal there. James Cameron is the next executive producer and helped write that script, so it's pretty cool that he did that. Favorite 90s 4K? Well, I whipped out some right here, right behind me. I think it's either Malcolm X because that Criterion 4K is amazing. I love the packaging on that. That's just one of the best 4Ks that Criterion has ever put out. I don't have any issues with it. And then also I brung over the Blade 4K. That's a very underrated 4K as well from the 1990s. And even the Forrest Gump 4K is really good also as far as the 90s 4Ks go. We get a lot of good ones that came out. The Exorcist 3 4K, that's a 1990s film also. That's a great Shout Factory, Scream Factory 4K that came out earlier this year. It's still one of my favorites of this year. Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs also have great 4K Blu-ray releases that I really do love. The Reservoir Dogs has one of those Lionsgate 4K slip covers on it that I really like with the ear. Hold on, I guess I can like this. I kind of like this. It grew on me. I didn't like the pictures, but it ended up growing on me with this ear thing. Makes sense if you've seen the movie, Definitely something that was pretty cool. Also in the 1990s, you had all the Jim Carrey movies. You had 1994, you had first you had in February Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Then in the summer, you had The Mask, based on a comic book. And then at the end of the year in December, you had Dumb and Dumber. Telling for everybody said yes. Favorite David Fincher film from the 1990s. Oh, that's a really tough question. It's got to be Seven, even though I do pretty much like every David Fincher film that came out in that decade, except for his first film, which was Alien 3, which wasn't his fault. That was Fox's fault. They kind of just took the movie from him and took over, but that was probably the least of him. But then you get 1995, you get Seven, 1997, you get The Game, which is also a great underrated thriller. It's, the premise is very simple of that, but that's great. And then 1999, obviously Fight Club. So if I had to do an order of those, I would go Seven, Fight Club, The Game, and then Alien 3 as far as the 90s go. Shamrock Balls wrote, the films that I remember were a big deal in the 90s. Silence of the Lambs, Best Picture winner. Love that. T2, Jurassic Park, Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, Batman Returns, and Forever. Yep, 19. I love Batman Forever. That's the one that was my first Batman movie. Schindler's List, The Fugitive, and Braveheart. I love every single one of those movies. Telling Freddie sent you said 1990s. But before we get to that, I just want to address some of those movies in Shamrock Ball's comment here, because The Fugitive and Braveheart are two movies that in the 1990s they were huge. I mean, The Fugitive, Tommy Lee Jones won his one Academy Award for that movie as Sam Gerard, and then Braveheart it's a Best Picture winner too. And I guess that's just because how people feel about about why am I drawing a blank on his name? About Mel Gibson now. I think people forget how big of a deal Braveheart was, but you could not escape Braveheart. You could not escape Mel Gibson in the 1990s. He was doing everything. Like, another movie from the 1990s that he did that I really like is Ransom. People seem to have forgotten about Ransom, but that was a great one. Batman Robin, Schindler's List. People forget that Schindler's List is a Steven Spielberg movie sometimes that came out the same year as Jurassic Park. So not only did he have the highest grossing film of the year, but he also had the Best Picture. So Steven Spielberg was eating real good that time. Shamrock Balls also wrote The Mask, The Lost World, and Titanic. Yeah, all classics except for The Lost World. I absolutely hate that movie, Shamrock Balls. I don't know what happened with that. And Kevin L asked, most heartbreaking scene from the 1990s. I was just thinking about this yesterday because I was talking about Forrest Gump, but when he's talking to Jenny's grave and he just like starts to break down when he's telling her about their son Forrest, that one's heartbreaking. And also in the movie Philadelphia, when his character is dying of AIDS and he's saying goodbye to his family, and Denzel Washington comes and says goodbye to him too, after they won the case. That's another one of those just scenes that just absolutely kills me. In the movie My Life, with Michael Keaton, when he ends up passing away from cancer, that movie's another one that scene is, oh man, it breaks me down every time. So those are like the ones from the 90s that I remember most really hurting me. Shamrock Balls also said Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan is one of my favorite war movies. I'm not the biggest war movie guy, but if you can get a really good one, I usually love it, like Apocalypse Now or, Platoon. But Saving Private Ryan's easily the best war movie of the 1990s. And of course, it's Steven Spielberg. Didn't win Best Picture, though. That was one of those Harvey Weinstein years where I believe Shakespeare in Love won Best Picture because it was a Miramax film and he just did a good job campaigning. Does anyone remember Shakespeare in Love? I've only seen it once, and I don't remember loving that movie, so I'm not too sure why that didn't win, because obviously Saving Private Ryan, just the opening scene is iconic. That it's one of the best films, one of the best opening scenes in film history. So well done. And then the rest of the movie that comes up after it is still great. It's still a great movie. You even get a nice little Matt Damon performance in there, and Vin Diesel showed he could actually act. And Vin Diesel actually directed a movie, and that's what got him cast by Steven Spielberg in that movie. And that's kind of where his career took off. And now he's the head of the family, isn't he? So tell him Freddie sent you to Shamrock. Good job, Shamrock. Shamrock knows his stuff when it comes to movies. Shamrock Balls wrote, Chiefs Ray, just films I remember were big, not necessarily all my favorite. Braveheart is amazing, he wrote. Spielberg was pissed that year. Can you blame him? Saving Private Ryan in the cinema must have been incredible. I don't think I saw that. I was pretty young, so I don't think I saw that in the movies, because that was 1998, so I definitely didn't. Instead, that year, I'm pretty sure I saw Big Mama's House in theaters, so that's where I was headed. Telling Freddie said you said Star Trek First Contact, good too. I haven't seen that one. I got to go back and watch some of the 90s. I'm gonna do a dive into the to into the Star Trek movies at some point. I have pretty much them all in my house. I just haven't done it. I've just started with the motion picture not too long ago. I watched that 4K just to, I wanted to see how good the 4K was. But I got to do a film dive. Even if I don't dive into the shows, I got to at least go do a dive into the movies, especially with the more recent trilogy that came out. And then, some of the originals are classics. Like The Wrath of Khan is considered one of the greatest Star Trek, if not best sci-fi films ever made. So I got to do a dive into them. I've just always heard from Star Trek fans that every other film is good. It's like the first one's considered bad, then Wrath of Khan is considered amazing, three's not considered great, and then you get to four, which is also considered, a classic as well. So I got to do a Star Trek deep dive as far as the films go. I don't know if you guys can see it, but yeah, I have my collection right there. Even if I'm not a Star Trek fan, I still want to do a dive into their films because their films, they're great. From what I understand, at least, I've only seen the first two, Wrath of Khan and the motion picture. Those are the only two that I've seen, but people are fans of them. Like I said, I was a Star Wars guy, and in the 90's, the only Star Wars movie we got was The Phantom Menace. And I don't know if you guys remember 1999 when that movie was coming out. That just took over the planet. I mean, there was Star Wars stuff everywhere. And then people kind of, people were coming out of the theater like they were trying to convince themselves like that the movie was good. They were like, "Oh no, it was good." People were still going back and seeing it multiple times. Like, I mean, I get that there are people of a certain age group, but probably in my age group that absolutely loved it. But it was just never for me. I tried. Jake Lloyd just did not work for me. I mean, he was great in Jingle All the Way. I mean, the best of his abilities, but you're there for Arnold. And as much as I love Arnold, I don't think anyone's ever going to say he's the best actor, but he's still my boy. And Shamrock Balls wrote, I have the motion picture collection, watch first four, need to go back to them. Great films. Yeah, I got to go back myself, Shamrock. It's just been too long. I enjoyed the last two in the new trilogy in 3D. They look great. I'm sure they looked amazing. Wrote John Doe Juggalo. I'm sure they did. Message retracted from Telling Freddy such, and then it says, "Oh, and The Crow." Yes, The Crow. Brian Lee's 1994 film. That movie is fantastic. I've always loved The Crow. I thought that movie is criminally underrated, and we never got a 4K for it. And I don't know why, because that movie that the city they created in that would just lend itself so well to a 4K. It feels like that early 90's, like grunge era that they were going for. Everyone's wearing like those grimy, dirty clothes as we shifted away from the 1980's where everyone, back then in the 80's, that's where the rise of hair metal. So, everybody just was dressing the same, men or women. They were wearing a ton of makeup and their hair was 6 feet high in the air. And then we kind of like dirtied ourselves down for the 1990's, and The Crow illustrated that perfectly. And then Sting stole his look for for the Crow character, literally called the Crow character. And Shamrock Balls wrote, speaking of Arnold, what's your opinion of Total Recall? Great 90s sci-fi movie. Total Recall is amazing. I love that. That ranks actually in my top 5 Arnold movies. It might even be number 3, to be honest with you. That's Paul Verhoeven who directed that movie. I was talking to Shamrock yesterday. I was saying I live up here in New York, and if you guys saw the news recently about that wildfire from up in Canada coming down into New York, the outside on Thursday here, Wednesday rather, it looked orange. I felt like I was on Mars with Arnold and the big 3-breasted woman. Unfortunately, I could not find a woman with 3 breasts. I looked. I don't think it's real. I don't think they exist, to be honest with you guys. So that was a little bit of a disappointment, but I felt like I was on Total Recall. So that was pretty weird. John Doe Juggalo, I hope a 4K comes soon for The Crow. I'm still on the Miramax Collector Series DVD. I have a really cheap Blu-ray of that. I did used to have that Miramax DVD, actually. Funny story about The Crow. I didn't see The Crow until probably in the late 90's, early 2000s. I rented the VHS, rented the sequel. And I was like, this is the movie everybody likes. And then I realized, oh, we rented the wrong one. So that was a little bit funny. Total Recall wrote, Telling Freddy wrote, I love Total Recall. It's a great movie. And Shamrock rolls. And speaking of Verhoeven, Basic Instinct. That's a classic. I've been going on back and forth if I should get that 4K. Actually, it's funny. It's streaming right now on the Criterion channel. And these are it's weird. Michael Douglas did that in Fatal Attraction. He was kind of like leaning into his, I guess his, what do you call it? His sexual side in the late 80's, early 90's. Although he did Falling Down, which is a fantastic film from the early 90s, directed by, I'm going to draw a blank on him, but Joel Schumacher, who directed the Batman films. But if you've never seen Falling Down, I think you can understand once you hit your 30s how that man reacted the way he did that day. If you haven't seen Falling Down, I think it's a little bit more understandable. And RoboCop, that's Paul Verhoeven's best movie. Adaptive Rifle Bear, what part of New York are you in? I'm outside of Albany. I'm on Long Island, so I'm, right by the city over there to the right. So yeah, so you probably were way closer to the wildfires than we were, but like I would see it coming down. So if like the city had it really bad, once you knew it was bad in the city, that came right to Long Island, like not too long after. So yeah, that was crazy. So I'm sure you had to deal with that as well. People were freaking out where I was. I guess they've never seen anything like this. I was trying to explain to them that California gets this all the time, but we're just not used to that here in New York. Shamrock Bros wrote, Freddy Total Recall is a classic, brilliant film. I love that movie. Arnold is so good in that movie too. Perfect. Paul Verhoeven just knew how to use what's it called? He just knew. He just knew how to use Arnold. And if you knew how to use Arnold, you have a great time with that. Did the first one seem that much better? John Doe Juggler, did watching the second one first make the first one seem that much better? Yeah, it did. He's talking about The Crow. Yeah. I just remember watching it and I was thinking, this is the movie everyone thinks is a classic. I was watching it with my cousin Dennis and we pulled it out of the VHS player. We're like, oh, that's why we're watching the wrong movie. But, we just didn't know any better. I have that great Studio Canal release. Yeah, I wish I had that. Yes, Falling Down is brilliant. Another Joel Schumacher film, wrote Shamrock Balls. Yeah, Joel Schumacher, he gets a bad rap nowadays just because, obviously of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, but the guy could direct. You guys have all probably seen, Lost Boys or Flatliners, which I know not everyone loves Flatliners, but Falling Down, Joel Schumacher can direct. He can, he's kind of just like a director for hire when it comes to those Batman films. He was doing really the dirty work of Warner Brothers, so he gets a bad rap. Tell him Freddie sent you, said Bad Lieutenant is great too. Jonathan Dougal wrote, what's up, buddy? That's Vex for people who don't realize. Bad Lieutenant. I want to talk about that real quick because I love Bad Lieutenant. Same director as King of New York, and I'm trying to remember. I think that's 1990, so that's also a 90s film. Bad Lieutenant is fantastic. Harvey Keitel is awesome. That movie came out the same year, 1992, as I was born, and it also came out the same year as Reservoir Dogs. So great year for Harvey Keitel. That movie, though, man, that's a depressing movie. If you want to see a gambling, drug, sex addict just like spiraling down, that's the kind of movie you watch. I love that movie. Also, as a Mets fan, it's very sad. Adaptive Writer Bear said, I've spoken to people in the city who said the smoke and haze was super thick, way more thick and heavy than it was upstate. And how that makes no sense. That makes no sense to me, buddy. I don't understand that at all. Because as somebody who on Long Island, it was absolutely crazy as you've seen as well. Have you seen satellite recordings showing all the exact Canadian starting at the exact same time, even though there are hundreds and possibly thousands of miles apart? I didn't look into that as that far, but this is the first time I've actually heard that it was thicker over here by us than it was in Albany. I thought Albany, anywhere upstate would have had it way worse than we had it here as far as the wildfire goes. If you guys, who aren't from New York or in our general Northeast area and you guys didn't see this, the pictures are crazy and they don't even do it justice to what we actually saw. And Shamrock Balls wrote, yes, Verhoeven wanted Arnold for RoboCop, but realized he'd be too big for the Robo soon. LOL. Yeah, no, he wouldn't have been able to fit in that. But can you imagine? Honestly, the voice work would have been great. I can totally see why they would do it. And actually, if you watch the trailer for RoboCop, it's got the Terminator score in it, actually, because they're both Orion Pictures. So I thought that's pretty funny. That would have been another cool thing. The real John Doe is in the house. That's our buddy Vex. So I'm glad that he's here also. He never pops up in these chats. Jesus, John, I brought you. I thought you were describing my life there. Sorry about that, buddy. That's funny. Favorite 90s Disney, wrote Kevin L. Well, So 1994 is The Lion King. That was probably my first favorite film was The Lion King. I was a big fan. I grew up at a lucky time, like that was right there during the Disney Renaissance. We had literally back to back to back. You had Beauty and the Beast, you had Aladdin, and then you had The Lion King, Pocahontas. So we were really just riding high on great Disney films. But The Lion King is an all-time classic. I can't say a bad thing about it. I mean, that movie, the remake, I could say a lot of bad things about it because it didn't need to be remade, and it's almost a shot for shot remake. Just go back to the original. You had some great voice actors like James Earl Jones, Matthew Broderick, the kid from Home Improvement. I always forget his name. That I know people loved him back in the '90s, and he just disappeared. But great voice cast, and it's just a perfect film as far as I'm concerned. Still one of my top 20, even if I have not as high on it as I was. Anthony Gonzalez wrote, "Hey John, since we're talking about '90s movies, have you seen Detroit Rock City? It's a classic road comedy." Yes, I have seen Detroit Rock City. That's Edward Furlong, and one of the only other movies that he did was that and American History X, and that's a great movie about getting kiss tickets. So it's a great movie. Actually, I have a lot of fun with it. It's another one that got kind of lost to time. I don't know why no one brings that one up anymore. Uh, and this was from Adaptive Rider Bay Road. Does it surprise you here? All the fires supposedly started by lightning, somehow all starting at the exact same time. How does that work unless they were started on purpose? Yeah, I'm not I don't want to speculate because I honestly didn't do any research, buddy, on all that stuff. I don't really know exactly too much about the fires. I did somebody at work showed me a clip of them like lighting fires, I guess to contain it. I don't know enough about fire and like how that works, but yeah, I've been hearing some stuff, and it definitely doesn't add up correctly. That's for sure. But I didn't do any research myself to give you guys any like you know my I know movies. I don't know anything about that stuff, so I can't give you my thoughts on it other than to say that it was just absolutely wild here in New York for those couple of days, and I can tell you that the people I was around were definitely a little bit scared about it. So, and I'll be honest, it was definitely alarming. That was for sure. Uh, John Doe Juggler wrote, "There's a few Johns in here today." Oh, I mean, it's a perfect name, so of course. Kevin L wrote, "Favorite '90s Christmas movie." Well, I think it's kind of obvious at this point, but 1996 is Jingle All the Way. I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger guy, and I know that movie's like considered bad, but I love that movie. You got Phil Hartman in there in one of his last roles as the neighbor. Put the cookie down. Who let you into my house and eating my cookies? I love Jingle All the Way. And then you also get a great Sinbad performance in there as well as the drunk mailman. It's a homemade explosive device. There's some sick people in this world. Sick people. I love Jingle All the Way. As far as other 90s ones, I'm trying to think what else came out in the 90s as far as Christmas movies that are considered classics. I think that was the most classic of them all. And Tell Freddy said The Running Man is a great Arnold film too. Great 4K too, guys. If you haven't grabbed that one of the best steel books, and I'm sure Tell Freddy said you has that. One of my favorite Shamrock Balls were one of my favorite films from the 1990s is American History X. That is a fantastic movie. I love American History X. I have the Blu-ray of that over there somewhere. That one, so that's another Edward Furlong movie that he's perfect in. Edward Norton though is amazing in that movie. And it's a tale that you hope would come true. Someone who's like a neo-Nazi like that, can actually see the error of their ways and all their anger, and you hope that that they understand that it's not you don't have to hate other people and be that way. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just trying to read the chat. Keep up with you guys. Blood in, Blood out. I think this is from Carlos Chavez. Blood in and Blood out. I think was the 90s. Yes, it was, and that's actually one of my friend's favorite movies. Is Blood in, Blood out. He loves that movie. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I know a friend of mine who I work with always talking about that movie. Dennis Schumar 11 John, what's up, brother? Hope all is well. I love the channel and grind, brother. Thanks, buddy. Dennis Schumar, a great friend of mine. I'm really glad he popped in the chat. Thanks, buddy. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Tell him Freddie said, love Belly. Also, DMX greatest film. That one I have a bone to pick still with not being able to get the 4K from Best Buy, the steelbook that I pre-ordered months in advance, and they sent me an empty box. So that one still got me a little bit upset. And then these are from Adaptive Rider Band. Do you collect VHS, Betamax, Laserdisc, or CED? No, I don't. I have some VHSs, but I don't have any of my old ones, and I always did want to go back and collect Laserdisc because I've heard, so many great things about that, and I know that that was like the original HD. That was the best quality you can get. That's where the Criterion Collection actually got started, was on Laserdisc. So I would love to go back and get some of the originals. Whenever I get some money, I would like to go back and like, have complete collections of like my favorite films. So I would like to have like Terminator on every available option that it's ever been released on. So if I can go back, same thing like with like movies like ET that have like Laserdisc release, I would love to go back and do that. And he wrote also that Jingle All the Way is a classic. I'm glad you guys agree with me with that. Worst 90s sequel. Speed 2 Cruise Control. That's probably the worst 90s sequel, but guess who loves Speed 2 Cruise Control? This guy, because I saw it about 166 times in the 90s because I asked my mom for, we rented the Titanic VHS. You guys probably remember from the 1990s. It came in that double pack. So you had on the first VHS kind of ended right when the ship hits the iceberg, and then the second VHS would kind of start up from there. So I asked my mom for that for one Christmas, and I guess in her mind she just thought, oh, he must like boats. That wasn't the case, and she bought me this. She bought me Speed 2 Cruise Control on VHS, which Keanu Reeves is in it, and then Jason Patrick replaces him. Sandra Bullock's still in it, but then you also get now Willem Dafoe just over the top crazy putting leeches on his body. But I still love that movie. John Doe Juggalo wrote, Jingle All the Way is a good time, though. Maybe I like bad movies. It's a great movie. I know people don't like it, but I feel like a lot of people. I know that Jeff from Films at Home, that's one of his favorites as well. Home Alone is my favorite 90s Christmas movie. Kevin, did you know that? I don't know if you watched The Ringer, but Bill Simmons on The Ringer says that Home Alone isn't a Christmas movie. I don't know how that's possible. Have you seen Michael Collins? Wrote Shamrock also. Actually, no, I haven't. I'm embarrassed to say that. Best 90s Bond films is from Kevin L. Well, we only got Pierce Bronson 3 of his 4 movies, and easily GoldenEye is his best. And GoldenEye might still be my favorite James Bond movie. I think that Pierce Bronson's his Bond movies start to decline after that movie, but I think that GoldenEye is such a perfect film. And one thing they never bring up about that movie, the person who does the score of that movie also did Leon the Professional, and you could hear it so well. And I love that score to that movie. Carl Chavez has Dell tells mom that The Babysitter that is a great 90s movie. And that's another one that I grew up with that I haven't seen in forever. Seth, Ready to Rumble. Love that movie as a wrestling fan, as a 90s kid. LOL. Yeah, that movie, that that role actually got David Arquette the WCW championship. I know that people absolutely drove them nuts with that, but WCW was in their dying days then anyway, so I don't think it's a big deal, But I remember how pissed people were. But Ready to Rumble is still a great movie. You get all those wrestlers in there, and it's funny. I think it's a great movie too. I agree with you. Tell him Freddie. Wait, Kevin, I wrote, what is favorite 90s sports movies? Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm not a big Rudy fan, believe it or not. I know a lot of people are, but I was definitely not. But I'm going to go to League of Their Own. That's actually probably one of my top 2 or 3 favorite baseball movies. I absolutely I love that. Penny Marshall directed that. Tom Hanks, like that's where his big run started. He had that in 92, same year as Sleepless in Seattle. Then he had Philadelphia in 93, Forrest Gump in 94, Apollo 13, Toy Story in 95. 96, that thing you do. The guy couldn't miss after that. But A League of Their Own is just perfect. It's a perfect movie. Gina Davis and that. Guys, remember Lita Petty? She was, or not Lita Petty, Laura. She was perfect too. She popped up in that, and Free Willy, which we haven't brought up yet. One of my favorite childhood movies. Telling Freddy's that RoboCop had a Criterion Laserdisc release. Did it really? Oh my God. Adaptive Rider Bear also wrote, I have 5 Laserdisc players, 3 Betamax, 1 CD, and about a dozen VCRs, including 5 VCR DVD players tucked away. See, that's smart. Shamrock Balls or the Laughing Fades. I see. I want to go back and do something like that. I actually want to grab a couple 4K players because I do worry that some of these companies are going to stop making them, and I want to grab a couple just in case, like you did with VCRs, because I don't actually have a VCR lying around anymore. Like, and you guys know Matt, so Matt has a ton of them, so I can always go there. I'm sure my dad still has one, and I can go get. But I don't have a VCR, but that is smart. I do want to go back and try and get some of those old players just for for a rainy day, because you just never know. John the Juggler wrote, okay, maybe I'll be the only one who wonders, what's your favorite 90s movie soundtrack? So I think my favorite soundtrack, and it's from all time, is Dumb and Dumber. A lot of the songs that are on that album are songs and bands that I had never heard of before, and really, I've never heard any of their songs yet. Like the most famous song on that whole soundtrack is by the Crash Test Dummies. Everything else are from bands that I just never heard of, but I love every single song on there. And then, actually, surprisingly, Batman Forever had a great soundtrack also, and so did Space Jam. But I mean, that's the '90s kid in me. So I loved all three of those. Those are great like compilation albums of just combinations. Like Batman Forever had The Offspring on there, which I love. Had You Too. So many great songs. I mean, Kiss from a Rose from Seal. Such great stuff. Telling Freddie sent you Johnny Mnemonic thoughts. Oh my god, that movie. Did you hear, Freddie, that there's actually a black and white version of that movie? I haven't seen it yet, but I do not remember liking that movie. But somebody told me that the black and white version is actually better. Michael Brown wrote, "Put the cookie down." No, that's a great line. John Doe, great question. Jurassic Park, Shamrock Balls wrote. So, what's the best '90s horror movie? Shamrock Balls also wrote. So, referring to Jurassic Park, that's probably one of the top five movies of the 1990s for me. It's one of my personal favorites. The score is really what sets the mood to that movie. I remember the first time we went to Atlantic City, first time I ever went to Atlantic City was for my bachelor party. A bunch of my friends took me. And when we were going in, my buddy Alex, he's like, "All right, we got to put a song on as we arrive in here, like we're arriving at Jurassic Park, but really we're just arriving in rundown Las Vegas essentially." So, but it was still pretty funny. I like that. uh, so what's the '90s best horror movie? That was from Shamrock Balls, and that I have to still say Scream, even if I like The Exorcist 3 so much. Scream changed the game as far as '90s horror goes. I really learned to love that movie because that's another one. Like when I first watched it, I was definitely too young, so I wasn't into it as much. But that is still the best '90s horror film. It's hard for me to debate that, other than to say it is that great. Were you a big Michael Jordan fan in the '90s? Oh, I was a huge Michael Jordan fan, Kevin. I absolutely loved Michael Jordan in the 1990s, mainly because of Space Jam, but also, as a sports fan, you just remember Michael Jordan was just the greatest basketball. That's why I still say to this day, Michael Jordan is the best basketball player ever. But that also could just be me being a fan of Jordans at the time. Not anymore because I don't collect shoes anymore, but I know my wife still does. But yeah, I was a huge Michael Jordan fan. Uh, Next up was from John Doe Juggalo, who wrote, "A League of Their Own" is great, but I'm partial. Little Giants was great. I love Little Giants so much. Little Giants was a great Rick Moranis movie. I mean, Icebox. I'm a little bit partial to that too. And I forgot to say The Sandlot because now it sparked my memory about movies that I watched when I was younger. And The Sandlot was another great one. Shamrock Bros. Sorry, John, was just laughing at your mom getting you speed tubes because you like Titanic. Yeah, I do. I still don't understand her mindset on that. Like because I asked for Titanic, you get me speed too. Like at first I thought it was like a ratings thing, but they're rated the exact same way. So I don't know. She just must have thought that I like boats. That's the only thing I can think of. Adaptive Rider Bear Kids is one of my favorites, and how messed up it is and how it captured and shaped an entire generation. I was born in 1985. I have it on Laserdisc, 4 US VHSs, one Canadian VHS, and one. You have a great collection, buddy. Oh my god. Yeah, Kids is a messed up movie, and I always draw a blank on that director's name, but that's like right in line what he does. That introduced us also to so many great. What's her name? I'm drawing a blank on her name, but that was her first movie too. And that movie, yeah, the ending of that was shocking. I remember the first. License to Drive is a great movie. I actually just got a 4K release, and that was from Carlos Chavez. I have to get that because I haven't seen that one in a long time either. Kevin Elro, Point Break needs a 4K, but most likely won't since Disney owns it. Yeah, I do not understand. Oh, Carlos Chavez, I guess soundtrack. License to Drive has a great soundtrack, is what he was trying to say. Yeah, it does. I think I have that on my phone. I got to check that one out. But Point Break, yeah, I didn't realize Disney had the rights to that. That makes sense then why we don't get that 4K, because how beloved is Point Break? I mean, people still talk about Point Break. It bothers me that we don't actually even bring that up anymore, how good of a movie that is. That's an every year watch for me. One of Keanu Reeves' best. Carrie Busey before the brain damage. So he's all firing on all cylinders. A great John C. McKinley performance in there. Man, I love Point Break. And one Canadian rental VHS screener. Adaptive Rider Bear also wrote, Umbrella is releasing a Blu-ray and Blu-ray box set for kids with the 2021 documentary about the kids and actors. I saw that was coming out, and I think it's a 4K also. It's just not getting released here in the US, so I would have to have it shipped in. But I did want that because I don't own that yet, and I do want to rewatch Kids. I have only seen it twice. Kevin L wrote favorite thing to get at Taco Bell. Well, for me, as of now, I get two cheesy gordita crunches, a nacho bel grande with no tomato, uh, a Baja Blast, and sometimes I'll get like a loaded grill or a quesadilla, depending on how hungry I am. And because it's Taco Bell and the inflation, it costs like $30 now. But that's my order. Talon Frey just said, Tommy Boy is my favorite 90s comedy. Oh, Tommy Boy is great. That's I quote Tommy Boy all the time. I was like, I can get a pretty good look at a T-bone by sticking my head up a cow's ass, but I think I'd rather take the butcher's word for it. Chris Farley in the 90s was just great, but that's his best movie. Even like Black Sheep might not be that funny compared to it, but Black Sheep is still pretty good too, with combining David Spade and Chris Farley again. But you get like when he gets pulled over, well, I got a Hemi under her, so I'm guessing 90, 95. He's like, 6. You were doing 6, and most people pull over to the side of the road when I flay him down. He's like, but Tommy Boy is an all-time classic. Adaptive Rider Bear says Scream has absolutely changed the game. Second, in my opinion, only to 1978's Halloween. Well, both, yeah. Well, if you compare it to Halloween, they both really did kind of revolutionize horror. Yes, Halloween might have not been the first slasher. You can argue Black Christmas, and even before that, you can argue Peking Tom. But that's kind of where the that's where the popularity really just shifted to the slasher genre being really the big boys of horror. And then once we get into 1996, horror's kind of fading. That's the one thing about 90s. 90s horror wasn't really that well renowned until we got to movies like Scream. Otherwise, other than that, it was really kind of a disappointment for a lot of people. And then maybe Problem Child 2, Freddy said. Yeah. I love Problem Child. First two, there's two Problem Childs, right? Not three, but yeah, John Ritter was great in them. That kid is a monster. Love that movie. Also, Seth wrote The Offspring and Idle Hands was awesome. I love Idle Hands. That's a great horror comedy. We just watched that. We did like an outdoor movie night a couple of years ago, so and it's always fun to see The Offspring pop up in that, just because I love seeing them and they're singing their song "Beheaded," with a lot of people probably don't even remember. Let's see what else. Adaptive Rider Bear wrote Little Giants and Sandlot are classics, 110%. I love those movies. Kevin L wrote, do you think they will ever remake Pulp Fiction? If they do, that's the only time I will ever protest anything in my entire life, because if you try and touch Pulp Fiction, we're going to have some serious problems. But I don't think Quentin Tarantino would allow such a thing, and I don't think even after he passed away, I imagine he will probably not want them to touch his film. So let's hope they don't do that. Tell Freddie wrote the same thing. They better not, Kevin L. Let's not forget Goodfellas and Casino. Yes, we didn't dive into Tell Freddie said and just said to him, classic Shamrock. Yeah, we haven't dived into Martin Scorsese yet, but Martin Scorsese put out a lot of movies in the 1990s, but really in the early 90s, he put out, besides Goodfellas and Casino, he also put out Cape Fear, which was another great De Niro performance. But Goodfellas and Casino are all-time classes. I go back and forth which one I like more, Casino or Goodfellas, but I love them both almost equally. They're both great films, just absolutely phenomenal movies. I mean, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci are in both of them, but Ray Liotta's performance in Goodfellas is iconic. I just rewatched Goodfellas a couple weeks ago. I was actually thinking about putting on Casino today. That's how good that is. Let's see. Kevin Alvaro, most overrated 90s action movie. Overrated. Actually, I have a really good one for that. Air Force One with Harrison Ford. Get off my plane. I've never loved that movie, despite the great cast, him and Gary Oldman. I've always just felt like that was kind of bland. I know people love it, has a 4K, but not mine. Shamrock Balls wrote, speaking of Taco Bell, Demolition Man. Yep, and that should just tell you everything you need to know about Taco Bell. That is the only food that is going to survive. That's it. That's going to be the only restaurant left. I would be happy. I don't know how everybody else would feel about it, but I would be ecstatic. John Doe Juggler, Taco Bell used to be so affordable, and now I cry into my food as I eat it because it's so pricey. Yeah, that was always the thing with Taco Bell. I don't understand how we kind of got to that point. Taco Bell was always the cheap food you can grab like on your way home or something, spend like 10, 15 bucks max, and you could get so much. Now it's like you have to pick and choose. You actually have to look at the prices. It's crazy. I didn't think that would get to Taco Bell. Freddie, Shamrock Brothers, Freddie. I'm partial to Casino more than Goodfellas. See, I really have to. I think I might be too, but I feel like I'm almost committing a sin by saying that because I know Goodfellas is like an all timer, but the Casino is equally as good. And some there are days, where I feel like that movie is great. Also, Kevin Pollak. I love Kevin Pollak. Sharon Stone, turning in probably her best performance. Kevin L. Did you prefer the original PlayStation or the N64? So my parents were divorced. So I had a PlayStation at my mom's house and an N64 at my dad's, but they could never cross paths because I couldn't bring one to the other's house. So I only had to play the PlayStation at my mom's and the N64 at my dad's. And I played a lot more PlayStation because I lived at my mom's for the most part. So I was more of a PlayStation guy. And until the Xbox 360 came out, I was always on Team Sony. So, but the original PlayStation, my first game was Tomb Raider. I have so many great memories with my original PlayStation. Uh, Adaptive Writer Bear said Larry Clark directed Kids. Thank you. I was trying to remember that. Charles Sodi and Rosario Dawson were in Kids. Rosario Dawson, that's the one I was trying to remember. That's her first movie. She would do a lot of movies, obviously. She was in He Got Game, the Spike Lee movie, and then the 25th Hour. Not a 90s movie, but 25th Hour is a fantastic movie from Spike Lee. One of his best, one that nobody talks about. And if you want a Blu-ray of 25th Hour, it's like almost impossible to get, or it's like packed in with another movie. So I don't understand how that one kind of got lost to time. Shamrock Balls, I really liked Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I also really like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and that movie is basically just a precursor to Scream. It's basically just putting Freddy Krueger if he was like a real life entity, a real life character. So I do think that that's one that kind of did get like lost to time because people kind of forgot about it when it came to Scream. So that's actually one that is a great movie. I always just think of the FX truck in it for some reason. And are you a fan of the Candyman franchise, Kevin Eller? Well, I haven't brought it up yet, and I just realized that I don't know how I always forget this, but for some reason I don't think of it as a 90s movie. But Candyman is my favorite horror movie of all time, the original Candyman from 1992. That Tony Todd, that is my favorite. Virginia Madsen. Is it Virginia Madsen? I don't remember. But either way, that is my favorite because when you dive deep into that movie, there's just so much more layers to it than just this, you know, Bloody Mary story that they kind of were going for. There's a lot more to it. It's talking about a lot more different things. I absolutely adore Candyman. I don't know why I forgot. That's the best horror movie of the 1990s is 100% Candyman. That just slipped my mind. And then Kevin also said, of course, Goodfellas needs a 4K from Criterion. The one from Warner Brothers is trash. I hate that 4K. I don't even own it anymore. That's actually one of the rare 4Ks that I actually returned because it's that bad. I don't understand what they were thinking. And the Blu-ray isn't that great either. It needs an update in a bad way. So that's one. Shamrock Balls Road. Do you know Tarantino has thought about remaking Reservoir Dogs with all non-white actors, John? No, I didn't know that at all. How did I forget? How? Why? I mean, I guess he could do it, but I feel like the movie's already pretty mixed. And who would you replace John Travolta's Vincent Vega with? Do you rename his character because we know Vincent Vega is related to Matt? What's it called? Character from Reservoir Dogs. So I don't know how you would actually even bother doing that. Hold on one sec, guys. Sorry, got my cat running in here. So I don't even know. I didn't know he was even kicking around that idea. But he's always trying and thinking. Quentin Tarantino's mind's just always going, and he just says stuff. I don't know if he would do that, but if he does, I would still be there day one. Faith Williams, my wife, the luckiest lady on planet Earth, wrote Clueless is the best. I know how much you love Clueless, and that is a 90s staple. Seth wrote favorite Leprechaun movie. Leprechaun in the Hood. Leprechaun in Space. Tell him Freddie sent you. Oh man, yeah, the Leprechaun franchise. Is that Jennifer Aniston? I think that's Jennifer Aniston's first movie. And if we're talking about 90s, you can't forget about Jennifer Aniston and Friends. But I think the Leprechaun movie was one of the only and Office Space was some of the only 90s movies she did. And Office Space is great. Shamrock Balls Road. Sharon Stone was so good in that film. Yeah, she is fantastic. And did she win the Academy Award for that? She might have for Casino. Kevin Elrow, favorite 90s Adam Sandler movie. And Shamrock Bros. Yes, it's Virginia Madsen. Michael Sinister. I did not know that. Oh, wow. Is that true? Virginia Madsen is Michael Madsen. How did I not know that? Wow. You just blew my mind. That's crazy. I do not see the family resemblance at all. I did find out that Michael Madsen didn't want to play the guy Harley in freaking Thelma and Louise because he didn't want to seem like a monster. But yet, then 1 year later, he plays that monster in Pulp Fiction. So even though I know he had to have his arm twisted to do some of that violence, because you could just tell he's just not naturally a violent guy. But I got a little bit off topic there about my favorite '90s Adam Sandler movie. It's gonna be Happy Gilmore. I do like Billy Madison a lot. I also have a soft spot for Bulletproof. That's an earlier one that people don't ever bring up, and I think that was directed by Ernest Dickerson, if I'm correct, who directed Juice and worked with Spike Lee all the way through as he was the cinematographer all the way through Malcolm X. I believe he directed. I have a soft spot for that. And then, Waterboy is also the '90s, which is classic. Kevin L asks, have you seen The Good Son? The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood. Yes, I love that movie. It's nice to see Macaulay Culkin at the time playing against type, as usually he would be the good son, but no, he plays an absolute monster in that movie. Great little movie. I think that movie's great. Talon Frey saying 12 Monkeys or Brazil. If we're talking Terry Gilliam movies, I'm still going to pick 12 Monkeys. So that's 1995 sci-fi movie. Actually features Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis. Love that movie. But Brazil is also great, and I want to buy the Criterion Blu-ray. But if you've noticed, a lot of Terry Gilliam's movies, like this year alone, we got Time Bandits and we got The Fisher King on 4K. I think Brazil's going to get a 4K too. 12 Monkeys already has a 4K, so I'm holding out for that before I get that. And then Adaptive Writer 1978 has virtually zero blood or gore in it. These talk about Halloween. If you can believe it, that's one reason that makes it so great. So many people consider it the best horror movie ever, despite no blood or gore. I think it's the atmosphere and the tone of Michael Myers himself. He's just a force. That's all he is. And you don't need blood if you can just make a good movie. We kind of obviously, even with Halloween 2, like they really upped the gore in that movie, but it really is incredible what they were able to accomplish with the budget they were given. That just shows you the filmmaker, John Carpenter. And also the score helps to drive that movie. I mean, Halloween is an almost perfect movie. Adaptive Writer Bear also wrote 25th Hour is amazing. I just love 25th Hour. I want that on physical media so bad. It's just, I don't know why. Spike Lee's another one where his movies, like, they're all over the place as far as like where the rights are. Like Criterion has released obviously like movies like Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing have a 4K release, a Criterion release. Clockers just has like a standard Blu-ray release. It gets a little bit it's frustrating because he's one of the greatest directors ever, and I would love a nice complete collection, but it's hard with him for some reason. Sexiest '90s actors, Kevin L asked. Are you referring to men or women? So I'll just give you one or both. Obviously, if you're talking men, it's Brad Pitt. Women, there's so many of them. Michelle Pfeiffer was firing on all cylinders in the '90s. I just think of Batman Returns. I don't know why. I mean, she looks like a psycho in some parts. In Basic Instinct, how do you not pick Sharon Stone? She was like Jada Pinkett Smith in well, she was just Jada Pinkett at the time and Set It Off was gorgeous. Janet Jackson in Poetic Justice looked amazing. She never looked sexier than she did in Poetic Justice, because I don't know what they were doing with her in the '80s, but like when she first came on the scene, they like were dressing Janet Jackson some weird clothes. It made her look way older than she was, but she was great in that. Tell him Freddie said agreed. Adaptive. Oh, thank you guys. John Del Juggler. Tarantino is the only one allowed to remake a Tarantino film. That's a fair point. If he wants to remake his own films, I fully support him, but he better not let anyone else touch him. He can do whatever he wants with his own properties because they're his properties. It's exactly how I feel about George Lucas touching up Star Wars. I know people get offended, and I don't like the decisions that he has made, like with those special editions. Speaking of the '90s, 1997, we got the special editions of the original trilogy. And I don't love all the decisions that were made with those movies to touch up what they did, but they're his movies and he can do whatever he wants with his movies. And he made them. He's the artist. So he can do what he wants. Do I agree with his decisions? No, but I'm not going to argue with George Lucas. The guy's George Lucas. So he invented it. Without him, we don't even have Star Wars. I mean, I wish he would make some better choices, but to each their own. Shamrock, Kevin L wrote, hold on, let me make sure I didn't lose this. Shamrock Balls. Tarantino says he thought about how the same story would play out with Minorities. He said he considered doing it as a stage play. Yeah. See, that's the thing. So he's like been kicking around like what he's going to do after he retires, because it does look like this 10th film is going to be his final film. So what is he going to do? And he's been kicking around doing some more writing, some stage plays. He likes to even make episodes of TV, which is crazy, but he's got his fingers in everything, and I just think he just like kind of is always thinking, and he doesn't have a filter, so he's just like whatever he's thinking, like his ideas he have, like when he's in an interview, it just kind of comes out. I kind of have a similar problem to that, where I almost don't have a filter because I just, I'm always going, and let's see. Adaptive Writer wrote 25th Hour and Bamboozled are my favorite Spike Lee movies. Bamboozled has a Criterion release. That's one that does. Bamboozled is great, and the social commentary on that is awesome. Another, I think that was Damon Wayans too. Great Damon Wayans performance. That movie was ahead of its time. If that movie came out now, it would have made way more money than it did back in, I believe, 2000. I want to say it was 2000. It was very early, like it was in an in between time. And I know it was after He Got Game, but that movie definitely is another one that Bamboozled. That's another one that deserves more love. I was thought the Criterion Collection would have done a better job pushing it, but for some reason, that's one that I don't know. They don't push it that much. I love that movie though. That's a good choice as his favorite movies. 25th Hour is always rising up my list as far as favorite. It'll never top Do the Right Thing or Malcolm X for me. Shamrock Balls. Oh, did I read that one? Yep, I did. All right, next. Let's see. I'm sorry, I was just scrolling up. Scrolling up. What do you think of this? Is Kevin L. What do you think of Disney censoring the French Connection? The Blu-ray is going for $150 on eBay. I was actually going to make a video or a short about this because I do not agree with this at all. So the word going around is that Disney touched the French Connection. They took a line of dialogue out of the movie, offensive dialogue. Now, if you guys have ever seen the Connection, you know that Gene Hackman's character is an anti-hero. He's not a lovable guy. You're not supposed to like everything he does. Even though he's on the right side of the law, he's doing some dirty, shady stuff. Really, he's kind of a corrupt cop. And the way he talks about minorities and just other people in general is extremely offensive. But it's also, I believe, a 1971 or 1972 film. And that's unfortunately that's how it was at the time, and I think taking that out, you're doing the movie a disservice and everybody else a disservice because A, now we all know that it's censored, and B, that's just how it was. That character's not supposed to be likable, and yeah, being a racist is unfortunately. I mean, unfortunately, it is. You're not supposed. That's supposed to show you that you're not supposed to like this guy. Like he's not supposed to be the squeaky clean guy that operates in the in the white hat wearing area. He's operating in the gray where you do have to feel indecisive about it. You do have to have those feelings like, should I like this guy or not? And like that, taking that out, I feel like is almost like taking that away. Like you're not seeing the real person. So I don't agree with that. I don't understand it. And the Blu-ray being that much money, I won't buy it. So unfortunately I'm not spending that much money on it. That's ridiculous. That movie was like $6 the other day. Seth Rowe, favorite movie with Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, it's probably his first movie, right? But definitely it's going to be Point Break. But he's actually got quite a good little run of acting going. He's been floating around forever since then. Kevin L wrote Fight Club or Seven. I am going to pick Seven. Seven is my Tell him Freddie sent you agree with me. Seven is probably his greatest movie in my opinion. I mean, Fight Club is right there, and they both came out in the same decade, so it's really hard for me to pick. Um, that's a real tough one. And then Kevin L wrote back favorite Tom Cruise movie from the 90s. Well, despite having Mission Impossible, Eyes Wide Shut, Magnolia. Well, Magnolia might have been no, it's 1999, and Jerry Maguire. My favorite Tom Cruise movie from the 1990s was in 1990, and that's Days of Thunder, directed by Tony Scott. I know that's just basically Top Gun on wheels, but I have a very soft spot for that movie. I love the Hans Zimmer score in that movie. Michael Rooker is great as Rowdy Burns, and Nicole Kidman is great in that movie. Is it a serious movie? No, it's absolutely silly, but I love that movie so much. It's just that's one that I have to pick that. Who else is in that movie? Wow, Robert Duvall, Randy Quaid. I watch that movie all the time. I always get in the mood for that movie. It just makes me feel good. What actor owned the 90s? I think Tom Cruise. Speaking of actors who owned the 90s, Tom Cruise, that was his decade. He was firing on all cylinders. He started his own production company in the 90s. Tell him Freddie sent you also wrote thought on End of Days. I just rewatched End of Days recently. That's a Catherine Bigelow movie is also, and that movie is fantastic. Shamrock wrote balls. Kevin L. He wrote Kevin L. That's ridiculous. Yeah, I agree, Shamrock. Like no one's going to be spending that much money on that. And he wrote the Blu-ray of French Connection going for less than 10 quid. I mean, I get what it is. I get the reason why people are hoarding these, but that is just too much money. Uh, oh my God. Seth asked, do you remember Radio Flyer or Josh and Sam? I'm digging deep here. I do remember Radio Flyer so well. I remember, actually, I can remember me watching Radio Flyer. And that movie, it kind of made me sad. I saw it young. So I just remember, like, because just remembering that actual tale, and that movie made me real sad. It was a 90s kid movie for sure. Kind of always reminded me of Indian in the Cupboard. That was another 90s kid movie that kind of made me sad also. But I don't remember Josh and Sam. I've heard the name, but I definitely don't remember it. Kevin L wrote thoughts on Good Burger. Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. Can I take your order? Good Burger 2 coming this year. I loved Good Burger. Another, Keenan and Kel was a big part of my childhood. All that. I absolutely love those shows. Keenan Thompson's still floating around. I'm excited for Good Burger 2, but the first one is a classic. And what's his name from The Godfather is in that movie, no less. It's unbelievable. And but Mondo, I always wanted a Good Burger because Mondo Burger, though, I don't know why people would even want to eat at Mondo Burger. The burgers look terrible. That's way too much meat. And now you know how fucking artificial it is. John Doe Juggler wrote, it's also a part in his character within the art. Are we going to start coving certain paintings next? The art should be left alone. Maybe they could do what WB does and just put a disclaimer in front of it. I think that's the best idea. That's all you have to do is be like, a simple disclaimer. It's the same thing with Disney, and just like, yes, this stuff was offensive. Most people, I think, in 2023 have the right mindset to know what is and what isn't offensive. But you have to also look at it and go, like, when the movie came out, what the character was. Look at it in the film. People aren't the same in 2023 as they were in 1971 or 1972. And to censor that, we can't learn from our mistakes if we're censoring our mistakes and acting like that's not how people were. Like acting like people weren't bigots back in the day, because that would just be completely false. And to act like that's not true, even in people who might be considered heroes back then, they could still have flaws. They're human beings, are very flawed people. And if you go back to the 60s and 70s, we saw a lot of flawed human beings. So it's very unfortunate. I just don't agree with that. Kevin L wrote, Men in Black or Independence Day? Oh my God, that's a hard question. Wow, I never even thought of comparing the two, but probably Men in Black. I have a lot more fonder memories of Men in Black. But the thing is, I can't go watch it here in America. I can't go 4th of July without watching Independence Day. And that's every summer from 96 on, or 95. We had Bad Boys, Independence Day, Men in Black. This guy was firing at all cylinders, and then he put out Wild Wild West, and me and two other people love that movie. Shamrock Balls wrote, this is why physical media is important to have, as they pulled the episode of The Simpsons where Homer wore the pink shirt to work and got committed. They've pulled that episode? That's crazy. I did not know that. I know Always Sunny in Philadelphia. If you want to watch the Lethal Weapons episodes, you have to own those on physical media too, because they do blackface in them. But people missed the joke on that. They were making fun of people who do blackface and said it was offensive. People just didn't watch the episodes of the show to know that the whole point of the show is to show you how stupid blackface is to begin with. But, you have to watch the show to get that. Tell Bryce, I have 20 seasons of Simpsons uncensored on DVD, Shamrock. Yeah, I have to go back, and I guess I can't get those anymore, because I used to have some seasons of Simpsons on DVD. I had the ones that were shaped like Homer's head. I thought those were great. And then Kevin L asked, favorite 90s Nickelodeon cartoon. Rocco's Modern Life was a big one for me back in the 90s. That or Rugrats. At my 5th birthday party, my family couldn't spring for all the bells and whistles, so they couldn't hire like Tommy and stuff, or Tommy and Chucky. So I got Angelica and maybe Phil. So I got kind of the side characters from Rugrats to come to my 5th birthday party. I was a big Rugrats guy. Doug was great. Ren and Stimpy was great. But I think Rocco's Modern Life was my favorite, and that's a Steven Hillenburg show. So he would end up, sadly, he's tragically passed away, but he would end up being the showrunner for SpongeBob. And I think you can see the similarities between the two of them, especially since he left the show after the SpongeBob movie, I believe, 04. And I think the show kind of nosedived after that. And then Shamrock Balls wrote, I think Tom Hanks won the 90s. He had Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Saving Private Ryan, 2 Best Actor Oscars. But ones I love from Jack Nicholson is As Good as It Gets and A Few Good Men. So A Few Good Men is one of my favorites. I love that movie, and he's perfect in his small role in it. And I've been watching some interviews with actors like Kevin Pollak and Kevin Bacon, basically talking about how on set, you come in. Jack Nicholson only did 10 days of work on the whole thing, but he had to do that courtroom scene. And when you shoot a movie, um, you know, you shoot the close-ups on Jack Nicholson, you get his speech, and then you have all those reaction shots and everything. And usually you would have a stand-in actor do those shots and not actually have Jack Nicholson do it, because why would you keep him around? But he offered to do those shots so that even though he's not on camera, like, he would still play out the scene like he was, so you can get the reaction shots from Kevin Pollak, Kevin Bacon, Tom Cruise, Demi Moore, and everything like that. He would do it himself, and he would do it in exactly the same tone that he would do that. So he was still yelling at the top of his lungs, and apparently that really meant a lot to everybody else on set. It helps to get everyone else's performances better. So I thought that was really good. And as good as it gets, I like that movie. He did win an Academy Award for it, but it's not my favorite. It's not even my favorite James L. Brooks movie, actually. I just rewatched that last year. It's good, but I do not love that movie. It's one of the only other movies you ever get the guy from what's his name? It's not Skeet. Is it Skeet Ulrich? From Scream in that, but I'm just not a huge fan of that movie. Shamrock, Freddie, I have the first 8 on DVD, and they said, nice, Shamrock. What's Johnny watching? Hello, cool kids. What's up? What's Johnny watching? Welcome to the chat. Favorite TV show from the 90s. Overall favorite TV show? Oof, that's a tough question. I never even really have put any thought, because TV is not necessarily my favorite forte, but I think I'm going to go with Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark? Those are some of my favorites. I was a big Nicktoons guy, so I was just watching everything on Nickelodeon back in the 90s as a kid. And then I kind of shifted also. I watched a lot of sports. I was a big sports kid, so I would watch Mets baseball. Obviously, you guys know I'm into all the losing franchises. None of my sports teams win. But yeah, there's I didn't watch 90s sitcoms until I got older, so I was just watching stuff on Nickelodeon. So I watched all that, Keenan and Kel, My Cousin Skeeter, all that stuff was my stuff when I was growing up. And what's up, John? And John Doe, Kevin Elro, Forrest Gump or Saving Private Ryan? That is a tough question. Whew. What would I pick for? I'm gonna probably Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is a real good feel-good movie that I just absolutely still love. Saving Private Ryan's great, but I watch that every couple of years, like every 3 years. Where Forrest Gump I'll watch every year. What Tell him Freddie said Wesley Snipes' best 90s film. It's got to be Blade. And Wesley Snipes made Demolition Man. He made The Fan. That White Men Can't Jump. We didn't talk about that movie yet. I love that movie with him, Woody Harrelson, and what's her name? I always draw a blank on her name. Got to start and do the right thing. Oh my god. Someone will correct me, but that movie, White Men Can't Jump, is great. But I think his best movie, he was born to play Blade. Chammer Ball, John's best Western of the 90s. Unforgiven, Tombstone for me, but I love Young Guns too. So it's gonna be Unforgiven. That's one of my favorite movies ever, and that's also one of my favorite It is my favorite Western, so it has to be that. But Tombstone really is also one of my favorite Westerns. They came out back to back years. I never saw the Wyatt Earp one, which basically came out the same year as Tombstone, telling the same story, but that one just had different actors in it. I never saw that one. Quick and the Dead is another one from the 90s with Leonardo DiCaprio, Sharon Stone, directed by Sam Raimi. Has also a great 4K. That was another Western that doesn't get brought up. That's a good one from the 90s. And Seth, Are You Afraid of the Dark was the best 90s show. Yeah, I loved Are You Afraid of the Dark. I still go back and watch it. Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps? Kevin L. asked. Damn, that's the $1 million question. Which one was better? They were very similar. They were both shot in Canada. I think they both even have Ryan Gosling and what's his name from the Star Wars movies popping up in them. Oh, speaking of the 90s, here's my Jurassic Park mug. So, oh man, I don't know what I could pick, but Goosebumps has they both have iconic theme songs too. I'm going Are You Afraid of the Dark. The Nick kid won't let me pick anything else. What's Johnny watching? It wrote Nickelodeon show of the 90s, hands down, Ren and Stimpy. Yeah, Ren and Stimpy. Do you guys know that Ren and Stimpy, Doug, and Rugrats all debuted? Those were the 3 first Nicktoons. They all debuted on the same day, I believe, in 1991. That's crazy. Those were 3 of the best shows of the 90s, and they all came out on the same day. And John Doe Juggalo just talking to John. What's Johnny watching? A lot of Johns, like we've been saying. Hey, Johnny, welcome to one of my favorite channels on YouTube. I love you guys. Thank you guys for being so nice in here. Liking what I've seen so far, Juggalo. I'm glad we can get some new people in here checking out the channel. We do this every Saturday as far as the live stream goes. Just want to let you guys know I got about 20 more minutes. Then I got to go pick up Faith from work, and I have to go on with the rest of my day, but this has been the highlight of my day, guys. Having a lot. I love talking to you guys. Best performance in a 90s movie. Wow, you want me to pick my favorite performance, Kevin, from the 1990s? Wow. I don't. You see, when you do things like that, I want to say it's Vincent Vega, like as far as John Travolta's performance or Jules. It's probably Samuel L. Jackson's Jules, but they aren't the stars of that movie. They're just a piece in a bigger puzzle as far as like Pulp Fiction goes. So my gut says I'm going to probably say Andy, played by Tom Hanks in Philadelphia. He won the Academy Award for that for that role, but he's playing off of Denzel Washington, so it seems almost unfair to pick that. The 1990s, I really also love Harrison Ford's portrayal of Dr. Richard Kimball in The Fugitive. That's one of my favorites as well. Um, so Seth wrote, thanks for entertaining me on my lunch break, LOL. Hey, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to provide entertainment. I do the same thing. I watch other people's stuff on my lunch break at work too. John Dougalo wrote, 96 is top tier in my opinion. Still top tier in my opinion. Yeah, that is that was the best of. We grew up at a good time if you were around in the 90s. Not only did we have Cartoon Network, we had great Disney Channel shows, we had great Nicktoons, and then if you went over and popped over to like WB Kids or Fox Kids, I mean, Batman the Animated Series came out in the 1990s, 1992, and that was a kid show technically. We even got a movie. A great 1990s movie based on the animated series. A couple like straight to DVDs, or straight to VHS, but we actually had The Mask of the Phantasm come to theaters. It bombed, but we had a movie come to theaters. We need a Saving Private Gump movie. As long as we get Lieutenant Dan and Bubba in it, I'm all good with that, Shamrock. But Lieutenant Dan, you ain't got no legs. I know that, Forrest. Rosie Perez, thank you, Which Johnny watching. Yeah, I couldn't pull Rosie Perez, and I don't know why. She's in another one of my favorite 90s movies. Before I get out of here, I have to bring this up because nobody ever talks about it, and it's probably one of my favorite movies ever. Jeff Bridges and Rosie Perez in the movie Fearless. This movie is absolutely great. About a couple people survive a plane crash and what it does to your psyche after you do that. So you get it from two different perspectives, and you also get a great plane crash scene. So if you guys haven't seen Fearless, that's a high recommendation from me on that one. Who had the better decade, Robert De Niro or Al Pacino? Wow, that's did Robert De Niro win an Academy Award in the 90s? I don't think he did. Al Pacino did for Scent of a Woman, which I still don't agree with. That was Denzel's Oscar, and he took it from him for Malcolm X. So that one's going to really bother me. Tell him Freddie sent you. So I'm going to have to go with, I'm still going to pick De Niro, though, because he had Goodfellas, Cape Fear, Casino, and he also had, Heat in the same year in 1995. And then he started to do Analyze This, Analyze That. It wasn't until 2000 where he started to, kind of nosedive with his performances, and we get, what's it called? Rocky and Bullwinkle. So tell him Freddie said Batman 90s cartoon or early Spider-Man 90s cartoon. They're both great, but the Batman fan in me is always going to pick. I have every season of the Batman the Animated series behind me. It's one of my favorite shows ever, actually. And the fourth season is not as good as the other ones. Shamrock Bowls with Kevin A. Not to mention it, here's one of the best of Heat is one of the best of the 90s. It really is a fan. That scene of them in the restaurant talking, it's just them talking, and it's incredible. Denzel in Malcolm X was an amazing performance. Yeah, that one he should have won an Academy Award for. It really bothers me that he didn't. I know that they were making up for The Godfather, and then you could argue that Denzel got his Oscar for Malcolm X when he got to Trading Day, but I think the Academy needs to adopt this policy of just awarding the best actor of each year instead of always trying to play these makeup games. Like, yeah, you give Malcolm X, that's one of the greatest performances ever. Denzel's one of his best, and you gave it to Scent of a Woman and Al Pacino. I don't even know if that would even be my top 10 Al Pacino performances, and that's the one that got him as an Academy Award. Were you and then he wrote, were you a Power Rangers fan? Kevin L asked me. Yeah, I was a Power Rangers fan, actually. I wasn't the biggest Power Rangers fan, but I feel like all of us at around a certain age at least loved it at a certain time. I only liked the original run. Everything after that I kind of fell out of love with. Wasn't Training Day 1990s. Denzel was great in that. Training Day was 2001 is what Johnny's watching. Yeah, it was 2001. Great performance though in that as well. Shamrock Balls, are you a fan of Friday? Yes, I am. Big fan of Friday. Love the first Friday movie. I believe that's F. Gary Gray's first movie or second movie. Faith Williams wrote to Shamrock. I want to watch that tonight. Yeah, she's been on a Friday movie. Faith, we just watched Friday like 3 months ago. Like we have so many movies to watch, and we just watched Friday. I could watch Friday next Friday though, or at Friday after night. But I love Friday. Great performances in that movie by just everybody. Bernie Mac has a nice little performance in that movie. Obviously, Chris Tucker. We always wanted him to come back to the franchise because he's perfect in that movie. But that movie's hysterical any which way you spin it. Uh, John Doe Juggler, he likes good movies. Oh, I'd say John likes Friday. Thanks, guys, all for your understanding that I like Friday. I love Friday. It's, of course, it's one of my faves. You guys are just talking about Friday. So I'll let you guys keep talking. It has a great soundtrack. Ring ding. Yeah, I mean, Friday is a classic. John Witherspoon, who I recently found out his real life best friend was, because I think John Witherspoon's unfortunately passed away, was David Letterman. I always thought that was such a weird combination that David Letterman would be best friends in real life with John Witherspoon. I just feel like they come from different sides of the earth, but I guess that's that comedian's mentality. And John Witherspoon is hysterical. Best Oscar snub of the 90s. I mean, technically, I guess it's the 1990s Oscars, but Do the Right Thing didn't get a Best Picture nomination. And that was the same year that Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture. And yet Do the Right Thing is 100 times better than Driving Miss Daisy. That's a big one. But really, anything that Spike Lee that didn't win for Malcolm X is an Oscar snub to me. You know, I don't understand how Malcolm X didn't get a nomination. None of this stuff. That's one of my favorite films ever. It really bothers me that didn't get him. Dr. Delfred, yep, Dr. Dre Shamrock. Dr. Dre, he was killing it in the 90s. Adaptive Writer Bear wrote, Disney or any streaming editing films is why I'll never watch streaming again and love having over 1,000 VHS, 1,500 DVDs, 250 Blu-rays, 200 Laserdiscs, 150 HD DVDs, and like 30 CDs. Yeah, one day I want to kind of hit where you get, and I've been... I always said I'll never buy. Like, I have a bunch of series on DVD and Blu-ray, like that 70s show, Reno 911, Batman the Animated Series, X-Files, and some of my favorite ones, Twin Peaks. But I have to really now consider going in and getting all the shows that I'm ever going to watch again on Blu-ray because I'm really having a hard time with streaming services. Actually, we're putting out a streaming service video this week, kind of addressing that and like which ones people need and don't need. I'm really sick of them pulling stuff from these streaming services and that have never had physical release, and now they're just gone, so you don't have to pay royalty. That's just bad business practice, and it's really frustrating me. Not next Friday, though, she wrote. Why not? I believe Ice Cube's favorite movie is Jaws. Of course it is, Shamrock. Everyone's favorite movie is Jaws, just not mine. What's Johnny watching? Wrote, my opinion of best Oscar stuff, Burt Reynolds gave a better performance than Robin Williams. Okay, so you're talking about Boogie Nights. Burt Reynolds probably would have won Best Actor for that year over Robin Williams, although I don't think he gave her a better performance than Robin Williams did in Good Will Hunting. But Burt Reynolds decided to go on every talk show and talk shit about Boogie Nights and Paul Thomas Anderson. And I feel like he did himself a disservice by doing that because he probably would have had a career resurgence, but he couldn't stay out of his own way. But his performance in Boogie Nights is absolutely incredible. I love him in that movie. I love Boogie Nights. That's one that I've been waiting for a 4K for a very long time. Favorite 90s sports moments. Well, I was favorite 90s sports moments. I mean, you guys probably don't watch NASCAR, but in 1998, Dale Earnhardt won the Daytona 500. That was a big one for me. Jeff Gordon, I was a fan of his one in 97 and 99. So those were big moments for me. But Michael Jordan getting the six-peat is, he won 6 NBA finals in the 90s. He won the MVP in all 6 of them. I think that ends the debate between him and LeBron. Not that I dislike LeBron, but Michael Jordan, he couldn't miss in the 90s. Now, I've heard arguments about his 1980s and like before he got Scottie Pippen, before Phil Jackson got there. I've heard all these arguments. But winning 6 NBA champions and 6 finals MVPs in the 90s tells me all you need to know about some great moments in the 90s. The Mets didn't go to the World Series until 2000, but I have some favorite Mets teams in the 1990s that I love going back and watching. Shamrock Bros. I like next Friday, baby D, but not Friday after. Friday after next is great. Top flight security of the world, Craig. Well, I mean, Private Ryan not winning Best Picture. That was a bad one but that was, we know why that didn't win Best Picture. That was because Harvey Weinstein had to go out there campaigning for freaking Shakespeare in Love. Bigger Oscar snub to me, first from Kevin L, is Shakespeare in Love or Saving Private Ryan. Yeah. That's the politics of Hollywood that really were bad at the time. Harvey Weinstein was just, unfortunately, he was out there campaigning and basically twisted everyone's arms to give it to Shakespeare in Love, I guess. And it was all just for money. It wasn't even rewarding. But you would think that Steven Spielberg would have had more pull. But that is a travesty. That is right up there with some of the worst of them. I think Ed Norton should have won for American History X. That is probably one of his best performances. I mean, I think Primal Fear or Fight Club are his best, but I do like both. I do like his performance in American History X. I love his arc in that movie because he is scary in the movie. And at the end, you actually feel for him. And when his brother passes away, it's brutal. Tell Freddie just said X-Files is my top 3 TV shows. Yeah, when we first started the channel, I thought it would have been a cool idea to review every episode of the X-Files because it's one of my top 3 favorite TV shows. I'll just go back and watch the pilot whenever I'm just like, yeah, I need something to throw on to go to sleep. I'll throw the pilot of the X-Files on because I think it's one of the greatest TV pilots ever. And the first few seasons of the X-Files are some of the best TV that you'll ever see, especially TV from the 90s. It's not like today, like, they were still 23, 24 episode seasons. So you had like the main arc and then you had the Monster of the Week episodes. So those are all standalone. So, you had the main stuff, which, I think people just need to go back and watch the X-Files. And John Juggalo, my physical TV show collection is my favorite and most ambitious part of my collection, I think. Yeah, I want to one day do it. I have a bunch. I mean, I don't know if you can see it. I have like a whole shelf. Like I have I got like this year, I got Chernobyl on 4K. So to get that whole mini series, and I have a bunch of like some of my favorites if I can find them for cheap. But I always wonder, like, are they going to come to Blu-ray? And some stuff like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it's hard to get. But I have to go back and definitely do some TV shows because that's something in my collection that I'm really slacking in. It's just because everything is, on streaming services, but I don't want to be tied down to that anymore, especially what's going on now. Like it could just disappear. I have to like just commit to getting the shows that I need to get. So one day. And then watching Johnny, what's Johnny? Exactly, John. He just bashed it. LOL. Yeah, he would have definitely. I think he would have won. I think they wanted to give it to him. The Oscars love those redemption stories. One of the biggest actors from the 1970s popping up in a 1997 or 98 film and it being that good and him being that good, he would have won. I know he would have won, but he just couldn't keep his mouth shut. That's the only thing. Shamrock rolls with Tyson Douglas, Tyson Bruto, and Tyson Holyfield. Mike Tyson, it's so funny. Like I think of him as like the star of the 80s when it comes to like as far as athletes go, because he was just knocking people the hell out in the 1980s, and no one had ever seen a man like Mike Tyson. That's why people still are afraid of Iron Mike Tyson to this very day, because he's still the best, and we get to see him in some movies. Shamrock Bros. Soccer-wise, the Premier League, the year 95-96, Newcastle were 12 points clear, lost to the league to Manchester United. Man. Yeah, here in the United States, I have some friends who are big soccer fans or as football fans. They like a bunch of like teams, and now obviously people are becoming bigger football fans because of Welcome to Wrexham with Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds, kind of raising more awareness. Because here in the U.S., like the only thing I can remember really about as far as football or soccer goes here in the U.S. was a big deal. It was in 2000. The women's soccer team was huge. I think they won either they won or finished second, but I remember that taking over the world for a very brief period of time. But I don't remember any as far as football or soccer moments here in the 90s being that big. The rise of the Yankees in the 90s was frustrating for me, probably happy for a lot of other people. But as a Mets fan, watching them win 4 or 5 World Series, that could be tough. And we lost one of those as a Mets fan. So that was a big one for me. But it sounds like you had some heartbreaking moments too yourself, Shamrock. Kevin Earl, my favorite 90s show is Unsolved Mysteries. I consider that. I have a question that we answered yesterday. I love Unsolved Mysteries. One of my favorite shows also. 5 more minutes, guys. So if you want to get your last comments in now, then I got to get out of here. Unfortunately, I could do this all day with you guys, though. Tell him Freddie said Unsolved Mysteries is fantastic, by the way. It's the Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries, although I haven't watched the show. See this face, William. Now, okay, John, say bye to your friends. Oh, yeah, see, I have to go get her. See, she's the reason why I'm leaving. uh, Max Headroom was a great TV show. I think you said that before. It is a great TV show. I have to rewatch that. Adaptive Rider Bear. I actually have all 9 seasons of X-Files on DVD. I have it on Blu-ray. Good Blu-ray transfers if you ever do want to upgrade. I got to admit, because they kind of did this where it looks like if you look on the Hulu stream, very similar to that. John, I need to get you into Newcastle United. Listen, I'm always looking for new sports. I don't have the greatest of eyes, so I don't really watch like baseball or hockey. So the only sports I actually watch are football and NASCAR and basketball because it's easy for me to see. Soccer I can see, but hey, you start sending me stuff in Manchester with Newcastle United, I'll watch it, and then I can argue with my friends who do watch like soccer. I'm trying to remember what my friend's favorite soccer team is, but he's always watching it here. Who remembers Erie, Indiana? I have those on DVD. It goes for fairly big bucks on India. I don't even remember what that is. The Soccer World Cup was held in the United States in 1994. I was too young for that, but I'm sure it was great. Shamrock Balls, I haven't won a domestic trophy since 1955. LOL. Yeah, if I could take you through my sports history, Shamrock, it's very depressing. As an American football fan, I'm a New York Jets fan. I'm sure you guys have seen that. We haven't been to the playoffs in 12 years. I started dating my wife, Faith, in 2011. We went to the playoffs the year before or that year, and we got eliminated. And we started dating in April after the Jets had been eliminated. The Jets haven't been to the playoffs since. So I'm thinking I need a divorce because it sounds like she's the curse. Also, Millennium, telling Freddie sent it. As a Braves fan, oh my God, I can understand your sadness. Enjoy your sadness. Yeah, because would you win the 1995 World Series? You went to a couple more. You won the World Series last year. And the Braves have always just broke my heart. Then you had John Rocker in the 90s, who I saw actually pitch for the Long Island Ducks. So that was a weird situation. But yeah, I remember the Braves teams in the 90s. I like some guys, but as a Mets fan, I was rooting hard against your team. John Doe Juggalo, my last comment I'd like you to see live is thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon hanging out here. Your time is appreciated. Thank you, John Doe Juggalo. I really do appreciate that, buddy. I really enjoyed being with you guys. Telling Phrase, have an awesome day, John and Faith, and thanks for your time. Thank you, guys. Shamrock, I will do. John Newcastle are doing an American tour in August. Oh, in July, July. Shamrock Balls roll. Oh man, I'm a Detroit Pistons fan, and it's depressing. Great stream run. Thank you guys all for coming. What's Johnny watching? I appreciate you showing up in here too. I really do appreciate all of you guys. Kevin, as far as being a Detroit Pistons fan, you did get to win an NBA title in the 2000s there with Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace and all those guys. You also had the Malice at the Palace, which is one of the craziest sports moments I have ever seen in my life. Still, no, that moment was insane. I can tell I was watching ESPN News every half hour with that one. But anyway, I got to head out of here. So that's going to do it for me, guys. We'll do this again. We'll schedule it for 2:30 next Saturday, and we'll do it all over again. If you have any subjects you want to request, leave those in the comment section of the well done, John Shamrock wrote. Great show. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much, Shamrock. Look out for me and Shamrock's James Bond review. Diamonds Are Forever should be out this Thursday as long as I get the editing done. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you guys all so much for being here. I had a great time chatting with you. I'll be seeing you around. Over and out.